a woman's role is not to be the husband's mom. So you don't need to be like the extra kid in the relationship. And a lot of guys kind of fall into that because they get complacent and expect the wife to kind of take care of everything. Respect is everything to men. And if you feel respected, you're going to do more. So I think it's a mutual respect in the relationship. And so both parties working together.
Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. And we are back with another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. Of course, you know me as Amber Larkins, your host. And today I have Steve with me. Now, this is a very celebratory episode because Steve was my very, very first guest on Through the Trauma. And we're celebrating our 100th episode today. So I just wanted to bring Steve back on, catch up with him where he's been. And he's now started a podcast. As you can see in if you're watching the video version of this, you can see behind him, he started his own podcast, which is exciting. So we're going to spend a few minutes catching up, and then we are going to get into some very exciting things, dating, relationships, marriage, divorce, and what all that looks like. So Steve, thank you for coming back with us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really cool to be the first guest, and now I'm on the 100th episode. That's really awesome, and I'm honored to be back on your show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, time flies. It's crazy to think that it's already been 100 episodes. But also I feel like, you and I, we're in two different cities. It's not like we hang out all the time, but I feel like I've known you for a really long time. I feel like we align on a lot of things, and it's just awesome to see that the whole podcast thing has now, spun into your own podcast that is directed more towards men. Is that correct? Yeah. And I mean, mine, I'm not exactly all women, and you're not exactly all men, but we kind of have a mix. But it seems because I am a woman, I get a lot of women listeners, and probably the same for you. Since you're a man, you get a lot of men listeners. And we just thought it was really appropriate to kind of come back together and talk about some of the things that really our society, our culture is faced with. And we get stuck in this hustle and bustle of life, and we don't sometimes stuff these things. It's like any other trauma. We just stuff these things back and we don't face them. So Steve and I have talked a little bit about some of the things that we're going to talk about here tonight. But why don't you start, Steve, by telling us a little bit about where these last 2 years have gone for you? Like, what's the growth? What's been going on in your life?
Yeah, so a lot has changed since the first episode of Through the Trauma podcast. So when we did our episode, I was at the tail end of a divorce. And when that episode was released, everything was finalized. So I've been divorced for roughly 2 years. So now I'm in the co-parenting world. I have 2 kids, and I went through a process of almost isolation, probably almost after our episode that we did 2 years ago, where I wanted to focus on myself and really heal. And I got really into church, really into scripture, and kind of seeking out people that were smarter than me. And it was at a point in my life where I could ask for help and ask questions. And so I got in a men's group and found some mentors, and really kind of wanted to focus on myself and address what issues I needed to work on. And we covered some of that in the first episode that we did. But, I think mental health is a continuous process, and it's not an easy one. And I don't know what your point of view is, but the co-parenting side of a divorce for me has been almost more challenging than the actual marriage was. And so I've had to really, really focus on being humble and using discernment, watching what I say, and not being reactive, kind of processing things and doing what's best for my little boy who's 6 and showing him how to treat women regardless of a circumstance. So yeah, things have changed a little bit since we last did the episode.
Yeah. I know co-parenting, I think, looks different for men and for women. And I'm sure, it's hard for me to completely relate to the dad side of that. As most of my listeners know, I'm divorced, and co-parenting is challenging sometimes. I mean, it is, I feel like we do okay with co-parenting. I mean, honestly, I feel like we do better than most. And a lot of that, I think, has come in my heart as in the way of like forgiveness, being forgiving for some of the things that happened personally between me and my ex-husband, and then just putting that behind us and putting the kids first. But it's still really challenging, because when you're married and you have differences in what you think that, differences in parenting, differences in what you think is best for the child, there's some, you get together and you talk and you compromise. When you're divorced, it's like, I don't have to compromise with this person anymore. But on the side of parenting, you do. And so that does make it very challenging. And I can say from my point of view, it's very challenging as well. And I think there's so many different situations that happen when you're dealing with imperfect human beings, imperfect mom, imperfect dad, and then, trying to raise up some little imperfect beings. It's difficult and it's challenging for sure.
Yeah, and I think too, at least from the Christian perspective, there's not a lot of guidance on co-parenting, at least from my experience. And I really struggled to kind of find help with that and resources on how to navigate an unpleasant co-parenting situation. So a lot of it, I just turned to books and podcasts and things like that. But I really needed that resource. And unfortunately, I don't know a lot of people my age in a church environment that are divorced and co-parenting. So I kind of felt, almost like it was on an island, like I was almost kind of going through it by myself with a support system at some, and it's still it's still an ongoing thing. I mean, I still working through that, hoping for it to get better eventually, but it's still a continuous process with co-parenting for me.
Yeah. With co-parenting, what are your thoughts about that being, different with mom and dad? Obviously, because a lot of times court systems give moms they lean a lot more towards the mom rights, unless there's extenuating circumstances. If both parents are relatively decent parents, a lot of times mom gets the kind of the best of the co-parenting world, or I guess that's subjective, but I'm just curious your thoughts. Do you think there's issues with the court system?
Me personally, I feel like that the court system still favors the mom, but I actually interviewed a trauma therapist on our podcast, the Two Tough Nuts podcast. She said that the state we're in, Tennessee, now was more favoring the dads, but I don't know a lot of men that have joint custody. But to that point, I don't know a lot of men that want their children 50% of the time. Unfortunately, I'm lucky, and I'm going to give my son's mom credit. We have joint custody. My situation is a little bit unique because of my job, because I have to be at work so early in the morning. So the way we do it, I see my son pretty much every day. I pick him up from school every day, but I miss out on the small things, like a bedtime routine or dinner together. So if I had a traditional job, 9 to 5 job, then I would have my son more. And I think it would make the co-parenting a little bit easier, because he's having to go from, I don't know how your kids are, but he goes from my house to his mom's house, and it's a different environment, different toys, different clothes. And so Jacob's only 6. So it's almost like he plays a role. When he's with his mom, he's one kid, and when he's with me, he's a different kid. He's had a lot of, he's been very courageous through the whole process, but he's had some challenges kind of adapting to, the new situation. So I'm getting off topic, but I do think Tennessee favors women in divorces. I think most men are going to opt to take assets. And I may get attacked over the statement, but bring it, right? So I think a lot of men are scared. I mean, they're scared of that responsibility because I know for me personally, I kind of just had figured out, I was like, all right, I got this. I got to step up. And I took it as a challenge. Like I got to be the man that I wasn't when I was married. So now it's on me to raise my son to be a real man, but to be a good Christian man and to put God first. So Jake and I have a really good relationship. And I don't think I would have that with him if I was still married. So, and that's how I see it.
Yeah. And, to your point about you make hate from this, I may too, because I know that it really depends. I think that it's really sad when a dad wants to be a part of the kids' lives. There's a huge transition. I know you and I have talked about this before as well, but there's this huge transition where you're used to being with the kids all the time. And then all of a sudden there's a divorce and now you're spending time alone and you don't have your kid and you want your kid. And that's really sad. I think from a female perspective, sometimes you have a dad who doesn't want to be a part of the child's life. And so then you have the mom who's trying to work, trying to support the house, trying to do all the things and trying to have kids, get them to where they need to be. And that's really challenging too. So I can see both sides of this coin. Also on the flip side of that coin or on the same side of that coin, I would say that I think it's really crappy when a dad just walks away and they're like, oh, I'm single and free and now I just go live my life and I just leave mom, the mom's going to take care of everything. So who in the end ends up suffering in either of those situations? It's the child.
Yeah, it's
right?
kids.
Obviously I always like to ask, well, if there's a problem, then how do we fix it as, what can I do in my part to fix that? Now, obviously you can't go in and change people's views or opinions, although I think that's what we're doing here with our podcast in some sense. But I think the big thing is providing, and you hinted on this earlier, but providing some type of support, because it's really sad when you go through these things and you feel so alone, so isolated. You have questions. You don't know who to ask or who to go to. You need prayer. You need encouragement, and you don't have anybody. I think this is where you can do something as, by being a friend, by being a support system. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about maybe even creating a safe space for people that are possibly going through these things, because I also didn't have a support system when I went through my separation and my divorce and my parenting. And, I'm getting all the answers from the attorney. This is what I should do. I didn't know what to do. So what are your thoughts on that? And then let's talk a little bit about kind of what we're planning here.
Yeah. I think the support system is definitely a must and a thing. I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me personally, when I was removed from the marriage and my son's life on a regular basis, I was replaced almost immediately. So I had to navigate how to deal with someone else around my son when I, in theory, would be the one around him as his dad. I didn't really know what to do in that situation. And that's where God taught me more humility and how to act a certain way so that I don't show any negative emotion or have an outburst or be, just be rude. And it's almost like a constant test of humility. But I do think there are certain things that played out for me that I did the same thing you did. I would ask my attorney, but I was on defense the whole time in the divorce process. So I didn't really fight anything. And I think if there were support groups out there to kind of help, at least from the guy's perspective, walk through a divorce, and then how do you deal with a co-parenting situation where you've been replaced by somebody else. And I know that word, it bothers people, and people tell me, my men's, well, you're still his dad 100% of the time. And that's true to a point, but now you've got someone else in the picture that's filling a role that I played by myself. So you're having to almost share that role. And that's tough, man. I mean, especially if you're a competitive individual, because I looked at my divorce and I have 2 kids. I have a daughter too. And I looked at it as a failure. I failed. I failed as not only as a husband, but as a father and as a man. I just felt like a failure because now my kids are trying to, you know, sift through all this carnage because of my choices or my decisions. And it would just be good to have, people to lean on during that process instead of just kind of, oh well, this guy's a member of our church, but he's divorced, so we're gonna put him over here in this box and just kind of, you know, go this way. And I actually left the church because we all attended there as a family. When I would go to church on Sundays, kids, I felt like a ghost there, because we went as a family, and everyone kind of looked at me like it was my fault, like, oh, what'd you do? And I just got tired of it, It's like, I'm not the one that wanted it, man. I tried to be the guy and save it. So that made me carry a lot of shame and guilt. And we talked about this on our episode, the grief, just that isolation when your kids aren't at home and it's just you. And like even now when I'm in my house and my son's not here, it almost feels like I'm in a hotel or an apartment because it's just so empty here. And when he's here, it's great, but it's just weird, Amber. It's a weird, it's weird being 45 and having all this downtime when you used to being in a family. It's an odd place to be in. It really is.
Yeah, you said something here I want to address. The thing is, regardless, this is the human experience, okay? Regardless of what you feel, the fact that you feel it, you need to validate those feelings. And I think that culture and society, what happens is that they tell people, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Like you said that you felt like you were being replaced. And people will come and they say, oh, no, you shouldn't feel that way. Okay, maybe I shouldn't feel that way. But the truth is I do feel that way. So what do I do with those emotions? If I listen to culture and society that says you shouldn't feel that way, just get rid of that emotion, then a lot of times I think what we as humans do is we're like, oh, we shouldn't feel this way, so we just stuff it. It's like, push this emotion down so I can keep moving on with my life. And this I found is not healthy. We have to address those emotions and those feelings, and we have to have a place of validation where we feel like, okay, well, I'm validated in feeling that. Like maybe I'm not right in feeling that, but someone understands and they can help me navigate through this. Months ago, and this is so funny because God actually put your name on my heart, which we talked about this. But months ago, I had a conversation with a friend who had said it was a long conversation, but it came up that community was one of the things that really God was trying to tug on my heart about, was this community, building a community of people, because we do need other people. We do need fellowship with other human beings. And we need a place to share our voice, but we also need a place to hear other people's voices, because sometimes it's easy to think we're going through these things alone and nobody understands. But the truth is, a lot of people understand, just no one talks about it. So
Yeah.
it's detrimental. And, for those of you listening, I had called Steve up and was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a community. I'm not a guy, but I recently had 5 guys reach out to me, and they all had just randomly opened up to me. I just started to feel like there is a huge hurt and pain with divorce, and especially with men going through divorce. But I'm not a man, so it's hard for me to give a lot of solutions and
Yeah.
to truly validate those feelings and see how that they really feel, because I haven't walked that path. But Steve, I knew had, and I knew you had this platform, and so I kind of presented to him like, hey, what do you think about possibly starting a safe place for people to come, men and women? Because I think it's important. I think a lot of times people say, let's start a women's group, let's start a men's group. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that there's not. There is. I have a women's group and I love the ladies there. But I do think sometimes having a co-ed group where I don't have any emotional connection to this particular person, but they can speak in about, this is the point of view from a man's perspective. That's very helpful.
Can compare it to this, if I have a drinking problem and I want to stop drinking, but you've never experienced that, you might be able to offer encouragement, but you've never walked in those shoes. And so going back to co-parenting and divorce, I'm in a men's group too. I'm the only guy that's not married, and I'm the only guy that's ever been divorced. They're encouraging, it's a good men's group, but no one's walked in the shoes. They don't know what it feels like to deal with co-parenting, to not have your kids on a regular basis. And so I think with the community aspect, especially from a guy's perspective, if you can get other men around each other that are dealing with similar stuff. And I wanted to bring this up, for men, anger is a very common emotion, and it's a destructive emotion, but the Bible says anger is not a sin. Just don't sin when you're angry. And I'm paraphrasing that scripture, but what I've noticed is, and you kind of hit on this a minute ago, you kind of tend to internalize things. Like if something's not going the way I want it to go in my co-parenting life, I don't say a lot. I kind of stay quiet, but that it builds up in me, and I have to find an outlet for it without numbing. So not being a drinker anymore, I don't have a way to numb that. So I have to figure out how to process that. And unfortunately, that anger can come out in ways that I don't expect it to sometimes. And usually it's aimed at people that are Shelly, my girlfriend, is a good example. Sometimes when I'm having issues with co-parenting, I'm not yelling or screaming or anything like that, but I got this almost ball of anxiety, and it just throws me off, and it'll put me in just a weird headspace. And I'm the type of person, where I can be pretty sensitive or too emotional, and I'll go off, I can get in like a really weird headspace for a couple of days or something. And a lot of it's guilt, grief, and it's shame. And, I think if you can get a group of like-minded individuals together that understand what that's like, that's going to be more supportive than, say, someone who's never experienced this. And from a guy's point of view, because Amber, I'll tell you this. I mean, I shared this story on one of our podcasts, but meeting the guy that took your role in your old house face to face and seeing him with your son, that was one of the hardest things in my life I've ever dealt. And it wasn't even because I missed being married or missed my ex. It was just the fact that the picture that I saw, and this wasn't a quote, this is the picture that I saw was my son, my ex-wife, and then her boyfriend. And he's carrying my son. And this was fresh. I mean, this was fresh off of the divorce. And that was like one of the most humbling experiences of my life. And no one really in my life right now that's in a men's group or anything like that can understand. They hear me talk and they're like, man, I can't imagine that. They never dealt with that before, and that's hard when you're an aggressive guy trying to do the right thing and trying to be there for your kids. And then you just kind of see, wow, man, I'm just been kicked to the side. I mean, it's tough. You feel like a failure. I mean, you really do. I think that's where that community can come in and be beneficial.
Yeah, I think so too, for sure. And even if it's no more than like just support, just being a support system, sometimes there are no words. You struggle through things and you see those things and it's just hard to deal with the emotion behind that. But sometimes just somebody like, hey, you got this, or I'm just going to put my arm around you like, hey, we're moving through this together, whatever. I'm here for you if you need to talk or whatever, I think is so valuable. I mean, I've always felt like I'm kind of a conduit. I pair people. I think that being able to put people together with helpful resources and other helpful people that's either walked in their shoes or is walking in their shoes. And that's why I do feel passionate about starting something for people that are navigating through that. And, they say that leaders create other leaders. So if you want to be a leader, you don't just try to create more followers, you try to create more leaders. That's part of being a leader. And I'm probably messing that all up, but you get the point. I think you and I have platforms, which is really cool because we get to meet therapists and doctors and coaches and consultants and authors and people that are experts in all different types of things. And we can interview them, get a good idea who they are, and then put them in front of other people that maybe need the help and assistance. Meanwhile, people that are thriving they've been through the trauma, they're transitioned or, they've experienced a transformation and now they're on the healing side of that or the thriving side of that trauma. then they can reach back in and help other people. And I think that it's just a beautiful thing when you can have all facets. You have experts and you have people that have walked through it and you have people that are walking through it that can relate to you. That's the really beautiful thing about having community. And so I think it's really important. And, Steve and I we're planning something like this so that people have a space to share, because you touched on this. You have so many other ideas as well. It's like, were you in church? Now you have to stop going to church. Now you have to find a new church because you don't feel comfortable in that church anymore. What does it look like if your spouse has started dating? And then are you supposed to be dating? Or what does the dating world look like for someone that's newly divorced and has kids? That adds just another element to it. There's a lot of things to navigate on top of the survival mode or the hurt and pain and shame and all the things that you go through. And it's almost overwhelming. And I don't think it's unfortunate that so many people have experienced this, and I feel like so many people will relate, but unless you have truly been through it, you can't relate.
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think divorce rates are 70% first marriage and 90% second marriage.
Yeah, something like that.
Been divorced twice. To your point, I think one thing too that isn't talked about is how does a Christian navigate the world coming out of a divorce with kids? What does the dating world look like? How do you, how do you stay on the right path without just kind of following everyone else? Like you kind of hit it earlier with, let's just say most men, they don't take on the role of the co-parenting or as a, with joint custody split. So they're just like, I'm free. I'm going to go do what I want to. But if you're trying to set the example for your kids and be a leader, which in turn create more leaders, I feel like you have a responsibility to put the kids first, that you need to kind of lead by example. And once again, I hate to beat them up, but the church I was at, I mean, I was one of the younger guys and I'm 45. And I kind of was like, well, I need to just take some time to myself before I even try to date. And I didn't even know what that would look like, but it's definitely a unique world on the other side of things at 45 with 2 kids and not going to bars, doing what I guess normal people would go do. It's a different world. And I think that support system that we're talking about, that could be even something that would be put in there. Like, hey, there is a way to stay healthy and not just go crazy because you're out of the marriage, but you're still setting the example. So try to think of that, because kids, and you have kids, this, they're always watching you. They're always looking to see what you're doing and how you react and what you might say. I've really kind of taken on my role as a dad in a very serious light. And I'm an all or nothing person anyways. So I try to put them at the forefront, and it's really helped me to kind of stay focused through everything.
Just like you said, you don't drink anymore. You used to use alcohol as a crutch. Well, a lot of people, I think, use new relationships as a crutch too, and they'll just gravitate to that. Personally, for me, I was scared. I had been married 13 years. I was coming out of a 13-year marriage. I had no idea what dating looked like, no idea what flirting even looked like. I didn't even know how to flirt. I didn't even know how to look people in the eye. Like, I had a really rough time coming out of my marriage. I was in survival mode. I wasn't even thinking about dating. Yeah, it was nice to feel the void of when no one's there, to have some company, but it's a jungle. Trust me, it's like wild animals that are humans. And I do think it's valuable to take time to heal and grow and to reflect. That's a huge thing. I think when you come out of a divorce situation, especially if you have kids, it's so vital that you look back and you reflect. And I had gotten into a business mastermind shortly after I got divorced. And this was one of my big takeaways, I should say. It wasn't the main focus, but about if you want what you want, you write it down and you manifest it. And, manifestation is a trigger term for Christians, but But there's validity in writing stuff down, praying over this list of things. And so every time I did try to go on a date after I got divorced, I would see things I didn't like. And so I
Yeah.
just took the positive to that thing I didn't like, and I wrote, must have, wrote down all these things. Now, this mastermind also said, once you write down all the things you want, the things you want in a spouse, in your next spouse, or in your next significant other, then you have to write down what you need to become to be able to facilitate that, or to be the person that person needs, because they need a strong person too. And that helped me so much, because I started looking back and self-reflecting on myself, the things that I needed to change, the things that I did wrong. But it's like putting a mirror in front of your face, and those that survive it can survive the hard times. Like the marriages that do survive, I think they get really strong. But the hard thing too is that sometimes you didn't necessarily want it. I didn't want it in mine. Mine was the result of an affair, and I didn't want to have someone that was having an affair. In a perfect world, I would have wanted him to change, but it didn't work out that way. And this goes back to what we were saying about the church too, that sometimes people in the church that have never been divorced, they just look at divorce as it's bad, but they don't look at all the different facets that happen. Like maybe this person didn't really want the divorce, and it's just unfortunate.
And I wanted to say this real quick, just about the dating world. So I pretty much stayed single for about a year. I mean, I was separated. We were separated, for a long time, and then I was divorced legally, and for a while before I started dating. And I went on a couple dates, and all my self confidence was taken away, and I just felt kind of damaged. Like something was wrong with me. And it's funny, when I went on the first date with Shelly, I kind of just had the mindset like, this is me. Almost like we're talking on this podcast. I was like, and I didn't have a podcast at the time. I'd only been on your show. I was kind of like, this is me. And she did a background check. But
Typical woman.
you
We
know,
do it. We do it.
well, I'm such a knucklehead. I was like, we just come to my place, and she was like, now you might murder me. I wouldn't even think it because I've been on a date so long. But I was like, this is me. This is my story. This is what I've gone through. And it was kind of, for me, it was like, I'm going to get some stuff out right on the front. So if it's too much, or you don't want to deal with it, then hey, cool. I was really trying to be, not 100% like, hey, this is all me, but like transparent enough to show, hey, I'm authentic. I'm real. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody I'm not. And yes, I have gone through some really hard times, and I've been through hell, but you know what? Put the work in to be better. So, and I did what you're not supposed to do on a first date. I said, here's my car, here's everything, but it worked. I mean, we have a very healthy relationship, and I went kind of the unconventional route. So I'm definitely not an expert on dating advice, but I think when you take that time to work on yourself, kind of like what you were saying with your checklist and the manifestation, you learn how to set boundaries. You learn how to not harbor resentment, because if something does bother you, you learn how to address it in a healthy way instead of, attacking the other person, or saying, oh, I should use that word, but, judging the other person like, hey, this makes me uncomfortable, and this is why it does, or this is what I've been through. So this is for me, it's like now I'm dating as an actual adult. I'm not just, a knucklehead, but it took me looking at myself, like you said a minute ago. What are some things I need to work on? What are some things that I can change about myself that are not necessarily good qualities, or I'm not contributing? I always say this, I want to be an asset, not a liability. I have a small circle in my life, but those people in my life, I want to bring value to them. I don't want to take away from them. And I think when you work on yourself, you attract what you think about yourself, and it brings good people into your life, versus the other way where you're bringing in negativity. If I'm just down at the world all the time, I'm going to attract that. And that's the young version of myself is that's what I attract, was a lot of negativity, because negativity for me was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I've grown through that, and, and it's all God's grace, like teaching me like, hey, you need to be grateful for what you have. And I'm going to bring these folks into your life that are going to benefit you. Not saying I can't help people that are maybe negative and stuff, but I think it gives you a fresh perspective. And for me, Amber, to be truthful, I mean, I have to work at being positive. I mean, I really do. It's easy for me to get aggravated or to be negative about stuff because I'm just not a happy-go-lucky person. I'm not even keel. I'm either here or here. So there's not like a streamline for me. I'm kind of, up or down.
I think though it's something that it is work. It's like not necessarily a natural thing to be positive and happy all the time. It does take work, and it's a fine line of figuring out like when to be like at what point is it toxic
Mm-hmm.
happiness, like our toxic positivity. So I want to be real and transparent, but it's like working out. Like it's working out is a natural thing, but it's not naturally something we just want to do all the time. It's something that we do have to work at every day and be consistent with. But I want to say something to what you said you said you went the unconventional route. And this, first, let me back up and say this. So the thing about your girlfriend, Shelly, she did this background check. And this is what I'm talking about, people. For those of you listening, like, it's a jungle out there, and you do have to be cautious because you don't know the things. You don't know people are different in your 40s than they are in your 20s. I don't know. So anyway, so not that I think you should do background checks on everybody, but hey, safe dating is a thing. So do you. Anyway, with that being said, I think that separates who is serious and like actually looking for a person that they could possibly settle down with in the future, or someone who's looking for just fun, just going out
Yeah.
and date and having fun.
Yeah.
And I think that when you've been divorced and you've had that family life and you know what that's like, you know the positives of marriage, because there's lots of positives with it as well, that when you want that, you do just put it out there. Like, just, hey, these are my make or breaks. This is what this, and I align with some people and I don't align with some people. And I'd rather up front because I don't want to waste time, energy, effort. I definitely don't want to get my feelings involved with someone that is not going to work.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's unconventional at all. I think society tells us it's unconventional, but I think it's actually an effective way to date in your 40s or
Yeah.
beyond.
That's the point. That's a good point. I think I said that because a lot of the self-help book that you read for a men's perspective, they tell you not to do that. But I mean, it definitely worked. And she was the only, date that I went on where I did that. And so that right there, it was a reason for that. The other ones, and I didn't go on a lot of them, but the ones I did, I didn't share that much, but, cause I was uncomfortable, like you just said, it's weird getting back out in the dating world. And, man, I don't know. It's cause I was married, I had two marriages. So I went kind of from one to the other pretty quick. And I hadn't been on the single scene and since my 20s, and being in your 40s versus 20s, man, that's big change. So, yeah, that's funny though, but yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's so true. It's crazy out there. And I'm sure we have a lot of people that will listen to this and they're like, I completely understand. It's crazy. But I think it's hard to navigate dating, especially as a Christian. That adds a whole nother element to it. But I do think that being a Christian and dating teaches you some level of discipline and responsibility. Not just going out here. And I know people say like, oh, I'm a Christian, and they just go out here and, whatever. We see it a lot in our culture is what I'm trying to say. Because I do think, and you and I have talked about this, but the pulpit has lost a lot of its power because people think sinning is okay and unrepentance is okay, or false repentance, repenting over something they know they're going to go out and redo again and again and again. And, that adds a whole nother element to the whole dating scene. So that's, if you're in those shoes, you're dating and you're listening to this, like, you're not alone. It's tough out there. And going back to what you said as well, focusing on growing your mindset and focusing on your growth. I do believe when the time is right, that person walks into your life. Like you said with Shelly, she walks into your life and you're like, it's the first person that I've kind of divulged all this information to. And I do believe that right person walks in, you have to have patience. You know, as human beings, we like to force things. We like to say, no, it's my time. I'm going to go do it. And God says, no, it's not your time yet. But that's how we get into bad relationships. It's because we're not patient and we don't know what we want. And this is something that's hanging over our culture right now in so many areas, but relationships just one of them. If you're not clear on what you want, how do you know when the right person comes along?
Yeah. Yeah. And I struggle with patience. I really do. I've worked on it, but, I think for the Christian point of view too, I never put God in a relationship before. I never asked him for help. I never asked him for guidance or wisdom. And I started doing that in the divorce process and then out of the divorce. And I would just tell God on a regular basis, I want to do your will, not mine. Because I kind of sometimes have a habit of, I'm going to give it to God, but okay, I'm going to take it back. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to do this. For me, putting him first and continually praying about it and saying, hey, which way do I need to go? So I can be patient in that regard, but when it comes to the spiritual side and being a Christian, I get conflicted because we do live in the world, and acceptable behavior in the world is not necessarily acceptable in the Christian faith. And so I kind of tend to not rush things, but I have trouble being patient, and I want to make sure, like, I look at my role now as, I want to be of service. I don't want to, like I said earlier, I want to be an asset in everything, especially in a relationship. So I've kind of looked at things through a different lens now and said, okay, well, and I tell her this all the time, we're a team, we're partners. One of us isn't above the other one. And, so I look at my role way different now than I did when I was younger, where I saw more of a power struggle or, keeping score, that kind of stuff, that's just not healthy. It's just not gonna work out.
So tell me a little bit, Steve, about your thoughts about the roles of men and women, because obviously you've kind of broached this topic, but what, in your opinion, especially being a Christian man, like what are those roles?
You mean as far as marriage or just in a relationship?
Just in a well, in a relationship, ultimate goal being marriage. So if you're growing together or if you get married, what are
Yes.
those roles in your opinion?
So we talked about this on our show this week, and the episode's not out yet. Basically, the way I see it, Jordan Peterson put it best. He said marriage is really sacrifice. And so I think as the man, I think men carry a lot on their shoulders. I think we have a lot to live up to, but society is changing roles now because you see more women that are, let's say, in the workplace, and they're doing the 9 to 5, and then the husband is, in charge of the kids, or he's not doing anything. He's not working at all. The man's doing everything. So I think a husband's role, like it says in Ephesians, love your wife like Christ loved you. And so to me, love also means respect. So if there's something that needs to be done that I may not want to do, but it's going to benefit the family or it's going to benefit my partner, then I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to harbor resentment because I have to do it. And I think it's really about that sacrifice. It's really about leading by example. And when I say lead, I don't mean coming home and yelling at the kids and yelling at the girlfriend or the wife and expecting everything to be a certain way. But it's meeting halfway. It's supporting each other, but knowing that, like, men crave respect. Respect is everything to men. And if you feel respected, you're going to do more. So I think it's a mutual respect in the relationship. And so both parties working together, whether that's the wife or the girlfriend makes more money, and you look at it from a lens of, well, I can still provide. I can still do things. I can take care of whatever it needs to be taken care of in the house, or if I need to run an errand or pick the kids up, versus just, oh, well, that's my girl's job. She needs to make dinner, or she needs to do the dishes. So I think ultimately it's just stepping up and being a leader, but loving your wife or loving your girlfriend, not just expecting things to be done a certain way, like an old, maybe traditional.
Yeah, I agree with you to some extent there. I think we agree. But I just want to add, I guess, like add to that, and from a woman's perspective on this as well, and just things that I've learned through my process of dating and reflecting and looking back of on biblical principles of what should a man be and what should a woman be. And I truly believe that, a man, God paints the picture of the man being like Christ, being the provider of the family, and like you said. So I think we see eye to eye on that. And I think that the woman, I think that people misconstrue this. And yes, we live in a culture where a lot of women have had to step up. Single moms have had to step up, be the masculine role and the feminine role. And, I've had to be that in my own life with my kids as well. But a woman doesn't necessarily like to take on those roles. I think there is a certain, like, people lift them up when they're like this boss babe or whatever. And, that feels good, obviously, to be lifted up. Like, I did this, that's good. But deep down inside, I truly don't think that women love being the masculine role and the provider and all of these things. They want to be that feminine role. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't work or help provide too. They are the helpmate. The Bible says you're the helpmate, right? But they should also look to the husband to be more of the provider. Now, I do realize that in this culture, sometimes women do make more than men, and you hinted on this as well. And I think my advice that I would say to a woman that makes more than her husband is you still have to respect him,
Yeah.
because the minute that the man feels like she doesn't need me, she doesn't respect me, she's independent, she can do everything on her own, they quit wanting to be there. I mean, I'm guessing, because ultimately, innately inside of us, there is something that God put in the man to be he's going out hunting and doing all the things to provide for the family. And I've been there. I can speak to this because honestly, if I had to reflect back, this was probably one of the things I did really poorly in my own marriage, where I have always been a super independent person. And I just was like, I can do a lot of this myself. And I honestly thought it was a good thing. I'm like, wouldn't everybody want an independent person? But I didn't understand the roles of men and women, which goes back to having a community and having a place where you can have these kinds of conversations in a safe environment.
Yeah. And to kind of add to that real quick, one thing that jumped out at me through my men's group, we did a study called Better Man. And in Genesis, God tells Adam, love and protect God's woman. And I know, going to your point about the independent woman, every woman wants to feel safe when they're with their man. And that may be in a role where the man's not going to come home, yell and scream or kick or punch a hole in the wall to where you're out in society. And if something happens, the woman knows, hey, my husband's going to kick that guy's, if he has to, if the situation arises. And I always had the protector role down really good through my whole life, just because of career paths I chose. I mean, I'm ex-military, I'm ex-law enforcement. It's always been really comfortable in that. But as far as what you're saying, and the woman kind of being independent and maybe taking on roles to where the guy won't step up, I think every man deep down, maybe not necessarily the provider role, I get what you're saying though, but also that protector role.
Oh,
A
yeah, for
woman
sure.
needs to feel safe, whatever situation that's in. And something I did, and I'm going to throw Shelly under the bus again. Something that I did with her very early on is I would never let her walk where she's closest to the street. I would always put myself in front of her, beside her, so I'm closer to the road. I learned that in the Navy. I learned you never let a woman walk closer to the road in case a car skips up on the sidewalk. And she thought that was the coolest thing ever. And that's a simple thing, that man being a protector. Hey, I'm going to get hit first so you don't get hit. And so I think it's things like that where men need to kind of step up and embrace that primal role. Like, hey, and not every dude's going to walk around. It's, an MMA fighter, gunslinger, but still be able to protect your family, even if it's with your kids. I do it with my son. I would put myself or my daughter, I put me in front of wherever danger might arise. I think that's the big thing. And I hate that boss, what did you say? Boss lady or
Boss babes.
I hate that. I hate that.
I mean, I like it. It's trendy. for a single woman, kind of it's kind of trendy. So I do like it.
Yeah, I know
But
it.
you can't take that into a relationship, um,
Yeah.
because only one person can be the head. I'm not even going to use the word boss because that would not define it correctly. But
You go
only
Chesapeake.
one. That's right. Only one person can be the head. And personally, as a woman, I really believe when a woman sits down to think about it, I'm glad you brought that up about the protector role because it's so true. If you sit down and you really reflect on this, there is something when you are with someone that values those roles, it allows you to be feminine. It allows you to fall back into this feminine place of that nurturer, that cuddler. That's what we are as moms. That's what we should be, is being able to cuddle our kids and nurture them and give them all the love and affection and be more empathetic and sympathetic and all these things with our kids and with our husband if you have one. But I think that sometimes that gets lost, and it definitely gets lost when you have everything forced on you as a single mom, for sure, where now you're having to play both roles. It's hard. um, but it's also should be something that if you are a single mom, you should be thinking about, because if and when God brings that person into your life that is your person, you want to be able to kind of fall back into that feminine place, because it's a different role. Men and women have different roles in the relationship. And and it's comforting. I think if you can really tap into that, it's comforting. God doesn't make rules just to make them. He makes them because he's a loving father. He truly loves us and cares how we experience this life. And sometimes we just dig ourselves in holes because we want to do it ourselves
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
trusting him.
Yeah.
Man, what an amazing conversation. I think that we could obviously talk about this all day, but I do think that Steve and I are working in the backgrounds to pull together maybe a group and maybe even some in-person things that we can pull people together and just be a support. And if that's something you're interested in, like I welcome you reach out to myself, reach out to Steve on his podcast, the Two Tough Nuts podcast, and let's pull together and offer some of the support that I know people need. Do you have anything to say about that, Steve?
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to throw in there to your point earlier. A woman's role is not to be the husband's mom. So you don't need to be like the extra kid in the relationship. And a lot of guys kind of fall into that because they get complacent and expect the wife to kind of take care of everything. So the guys need to step up and realize, hey, this is my person. I'm going to love and support her and protect her, but her job is to not take care of me like my mom did. As far as the in-person thing, yeah, I think for sure divorce, co-parenting, dating, all these topics, especially as we're talking tonight from a Christian perspective, there needs to be more support out there. I live in Franklin. I don't know a lot of groups here, and I could be wrong. I could just be out of the loop, but I don't know a lot of groups here for people they do have a divorce care program, but a lot of them are through Zoom, kind of like what we're doing on a podcast. You're not in person, and there's not a lot of groups for just to meet people, just to kind of have a community where you might meet someone that has a similar experience. So I think that's really a vital thing to have if you're going to grow, heal, and work on yourself and get through trauma. You need kind of that support group to do it. I mean, the podcast is awesome. It's great, but I think maybe taking it to a next step of in person, whether it's 5 people in a room or it's a conference at a church, just something where you get a group of people together that can share common experiences.
Yeah. And, going back to meeting people, I mean, it's this would not be the main focus of the group, but I mean, if you want to meet other people, who knows how God could work in that. And you meet other people that truly do understand, and you might even meet your significant other. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, oh, never know.
You just never know. But we'll get more information out about that for sure. But Steve, man, you got any final closing thoughts?
Yeah, just this is kind of for the guys out there. Just stay the course. This is a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and just take it one day at a time. And I've kind of said this before in the past. There's probably more people that love you and care about you than you realize. So when you feel isolated and all by yourself, there's somebody that does care about you, and just don't lose hope. Just take it one day at a time, and be open-minded enough to reach out for help or ask for assistance. And it doesn't make you weak. It takes courage to ask for help. Don't look at it from a way of like, well, I'm going to be a real man, I'm just going to stay quiet. A real man's going to ask for help, and is going to want to do better.
Totally agree. And just in general, people have a hard time, I think, getting out of their comfort zone. Like, these kinds of things are uncomfortable to get out there and ask for help, or to find support systems, or to find people that are like-minded. It's so much easier just to sit at home and, like you said, self-medicate, watch television, bury yourself in social media, or, looking at everybody else's life, or alcohol, drugs. There's all kinds of outlets that are unhealthy. And I want to see people truly thrive, heal from the trauma that binds them, and truly thrive in this world, because we live in a really weird time and world right now, and all the things that are going on. But I can honestly attest to this and say that life still, regardless of all the chaos that's going on in the world, to me, life is good. I enjoy life. But I think it's because I have reframed a lot of things, shifted my mindset, and I'm on a growth mindset trajectory. And I just want to see everybody. I've tapped into that. I want everybody to tap into that. So I'm with Steve in the sense of, you want to be a value and not a taker, but someone that gives value. And I hope that everybody that steps into my energy, and I think Steve feels the same, that we can be a positive force in your energy field.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And real quick, I want to say congratulations. You were kicking butt with your podcast, and you inspired me to continue to grow when I came on your show 2 years ago. And, that was kind of you laid the foundation and kind of springboarded my steps into starting my own podcast, because me sharing my story with you and then doing the photo shoot kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, I do have a testimony. I do need to share this with people to help them. So congratulations on a 100th episode, and thank you for bringing me back, and thank you for inspiring me to start my own podcast. So I'm grateful.
Well, Steve, I honestly, when I say this, like, people don't know how much it means to me when you say that it's impacted you, because God said that to me when I first got vision for this podcast, and it felt like I was doing nothing. It felt like I was just going through the motions. It is a lot of work, and I don't mind that, because I think it's a passion project of mine, but it just means a lot. What you just said really means a lot to me, and it almost makes me bring tears to my eyes, just to see the progress over the last 2 years of, 100 episodes down. And now that you guys are doing such powerful things. So, Steve has a co-host as well, and I went on their podcast. It was an amazing conversation, way different than what we covered tonight, but yeah, so go check it out. But man, it's just amazing to see that everything that's happened over the last 2 years. And so I just really want to say thank you for saying that. It means a lot.
Yeah, I mean it. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for you as well, and seeing your progress and seeing your growth, and that's been amazing as well. And so maybe on episode 200, we'll get you back on here.
That sounds like a plan.
Or maybe before. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll be back on too. So yeah, it sounds.
All right, Steve, we have a great night. I'll talk to you later. Okay.
Bye, Amber.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.